a really big reason uh, for me getting abused in the past and getting abuse inside and outside of the family. My autistic traits were very often the factor that caused abuse, um, and neglect too. And also outside of the family, I was very severely bullied for many years.
Hey, everybody, I caught myself another one. This one is going to be very interesting. I'm super excited to have this conversation with this person today. So, with that, thanks everybody for always joining me for these amazing conversations. And I'm going to say it again, I can't do it without you. And so, the fact that you're really helping getting these interviews and all of this stuff out, really helping the channel grow massively. So, that's the reason I get great interviews like this. So, that being said, thanks for liking, subscribing, hitting the bell for notifications, seeing me on lives on Wednesdays. And so, I don't know much about this person today, and I actually like kind of going into my interviews this way, so I'm sort of learning along with all of you out there. So, with that, this is Laura, and Laura's going to introduce herself, and then we'll move forward with the interview. So, thanks for showing up, Laura, and why don't you just give us a little background about who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Lara. Um, I'm from Switzerland, and I got diagnosed with autism, and that's also the main thing I would like to talk about today.
Great, great. How old are you?
I'm 23 actually.
Tw 23. Okay, great. So yeah, I remember you reached out to me because I think I had somebody on talking about autism and their son, and you also wanted to talk about autism and the whole situation that's happening around a lot of autistic people transitioning, which
Mm-hmm.
has me
Mm-hmm.
concerned. So with that,
Yes.
that's why I really appreciate you stepping up and coming and wanting to talk about your diagnosis so all of us can start to understand autism in a from actual autistic people. So because I think a lot of people are self-diagnosing
Yes.
autism, like
Mm-hmm.
same with trans. It's like what? You can self-diagnose having cancer now? Like what's happening? So
Yeah.
I don't want to take all your time because I think you have a lot to talk about today. So why don't you just move into why you reached out to me and what you'd like to discuss today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been thinking about doing something like this for a long time, but I've never had the courage because, yeah, it's pretty scary uh, to talk on publicly and especially about, yeah, very personal stuff. But I've seen so many things that concern me on
Yeah.
social media, and
Yeah.
I think many people don't really know what autism is, or they have a vague idea or stereotypes in mind. And then now there's a lot of content about autism on social media. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and that it's a little, yeah, it's concerning sometimes. And I would like to explain what autism actually is and talk a little about how it's a presentation on social media and also the connection to the trans issue.
Great.
Um,
Great. When
yeah,
did you get diagnosed with your autism? How
I
old were
got
you?
diagnosed three years
3
ago.
years ago. And why
Hmm.
did you go in specifically to get a diagnosis or was something
Uh,
bothering you? Yeah.
my psychiatrist referred me because I'm also diagnosed with CPTSD and dissociative identity disorder,
Oh, right.
and yeah, and that explained a part of my difficulties and differences, but I still knew there was something missing. I still struggled so much and felt like uh, even in the community of people with childhood trauma and CPTSD, I still didn't really feel um, understood and represented. And then my psychiatrist referred me for the autism evaluation and also told them about my trauma diagnosis because it's really important to look which differences could come from that and which or if it's something more, if it could be autism.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. No, that's interesting. I really wanted to know what was the underlying factor of you deciding to go get a diagnosis, which is actually really important that I believe,
Hmm.
excuse me, I believe in diagnoses help us. That's why I try to keep the transsexual space in a
Yes.
medical diagnosis space because it helps us understand it might not be transsexualism, it might be autism, or it might be something else. So that's why diagnoses are
Yes.
extremely important and why trans needs to stay in a medical space and not in a self ID. So with that, let's
Mm.
talk a little bit about what your concerns are now and what you see and all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's actually different things that concern me from different perspectives. Like, um, on one hand, it's the people who don't really know what autism is, and then there's a lot of content about autism from people who might have a diagnosis or some who don't have a diagnosis, um, and it's of course there's then also a lot of wrong information,
Yes.
um, which is spread, and of course, and I think it's, I mean, I think it's good that there's content about autism
Hmm.
so people can learn about it and understand more about it. But of course, there's also the danger of spreading wrong information and people maybe hearing some traits and thinking, oh, I can relate to that. Maybe I have autism, and the resources are really uh, yeah, there's not many resources for autistic people. Even to get a diagnosis, you might need to wait a long time. Um, and I actually understand that it can be hard to get a diagnosis, um, if if maybe for financial reasons, or you don't have someone who can refer you, or the waiting lists are so long, and maybe yeah, so that I can understand that, but I think it's also important to make it clear, if you make content, to make it very clear that you don't have an official diagnosis. Um,
Yes, I
yeah,
agree with that. Yes.
and I would also like to explain that many people think that autism is this one specific thing, or they have a stereotype in mind. Um, but it's actually it's a difference in the brain, but the differences are spread are in different areas. There's different areas of differences, and the differences can go in very different directions. They can even be polar opposites of each other. So so there's not just one presentation of autism, and even if people maybe know one autistic person, they think they think, okay, that I know an autistic person, so they are the epitome of autism, and every person has to be like them. But it's actually they're very different presentations.
Hmm. Okay. Like there's different, is there different levels, right? I don't know, do they call it, how,
Um, yeah, so the levels they're used in the DSM, and they're for support needs.
okay.
They're level one is low support needs, level two is substantial support needs, and level
Okay.
three is very substantial support
Okay.
needs. But they're not as a category of severity. They're a category of how much support you need.
Right. Okay, I see. Right. So the woman that I actually interviewed, I think her son was considered level 3, so he was not going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to take care of himself and even as an adult. So that's, and then there could be level 1, which could be, so let's just take level 1. Could level 1 be many different things? It's just level 1 means that you are able to take care of yourself and move forward in the world, but you still have autism.
Yeah, and level one people still need support, but maybe not as much as level three people. And I think the problems with levels is also that they usually mainly focus on language, speech, and how you can take care of yourself. But there's actually
Okay.
many different areas that could need support.
Okay.
Um, and every level of autistic people can look very different, but yeah, level three, of course, they need I mean, level three people, a lot of level three people also have an intellectual disability that causes additional support needs.
Right. So I see what you're saying, and it's very important that you're saying this because many of us don't. I think many of us out here don't really understand. Now, autism is just thrown out as this thing, and it's not
Mm,
just. And, I'm going to equate it a lot to the trans space. The same thing, like trans transsexualism is 100% different than what you see over here with transgender thing, and that's why those two need to be separated. We don't have the same needs. So same in the autistic world, right? So somebody at level
yes.
1 doesn't necessarily have the same needs as level 3 or level 2, but level 1 could still need support, right?
Hmm.
Just a different
Yes,
kind of
and
support.
yes, and it's also important. Many people think, okay, if you can talk, your your low support needs autistic, or they think you're not as severely autistic, but actually there's many different areas. I mean, for example, I can talk, but I can't take care of myself.
Okay.
I really struggle with hygiene, with
Okay.
preparing food, eating. I really need a lot of support even to daily living things.
Okay.
And you can't see that from the outside.
Right, because how would we know? You just seem, well, I'm going to use the word normal, whatever that means, right? But you just seem
Yes.
like you could do that, but we don't know that about you because we don't see your personal private part of your life. And so that's so interesting. Thank you for saying that because people make assumptions, right? They'll make an assumption about you, maybe as low level autism, but whatever that means. So I see what you're saying, and it's such an important conversation because just because someone says they're autistic, what does that actually really mean, right?
Hmm.
So with that, why do you think so many young people are not only self-diagnosing autistic as well as self-diagnosing as trans? Do you have any idea why these two are being interlinked with each other?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think many young people nowadays really feel very lost and feel struggle a lot. They have a lot of stress. They feel like I don't have a place. I don't know who I am. What makes me special or important, and how I can find a place in society. And of course, if you have a specific label that already that makes you special, it can really it
Right.
can really help you feel better, or find a place and find a community too. So these are of course connected. And I also think that actually people who are actually autistic, they are also more likely to maybe think they might be trans, but they maybe they're not, because they usually struggle with um, understanding social norms, or maybe they might not present stereotypically feminine or masculine. So they might think I'm trans, even if they don't have gender dysphoria.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's what I also see. I see a group of people who want to belong. Not everyone is saying they're autistic, but the problem I have is this self ID of autism. You might not even be autistic, right? You could be having PTSD or anxiety, or even, I think you said you've also been
Mm,
diagnosed with DID. Did you say that?
yes.
Dissociative
Um,
identity disorder, right?
Dissociative identity disorder. Yes,
Hmm.
and that's a trauma disorder, and it's
Oh,
actually, for it to develop, you need to experience a severe trauma for the first few years of your life, and it can only develop in the first 4 or 5 years of your life.
wow, that fascinates me. You know what fascinates me, Laura, is I see so many young people saying they have DID on TikTok. I got lost in a
Yes.
hole. I was just like going and I'm like, oh, I'm like deep, deep. I'm like, what is happening? So wow, that is it's just profound for me to see young people say they have this without actually having an actual diagnosis. So, do you
Yes.
think it's the same thing that these kids just want to belong to a group, so they say they have this?
Yes, yes, I think so, and feel special. And also with DID, many teenagers and young adults that claim to have DID, they see it as this funny kind of role play thing. So, uh, and they might be very imaginative and even actually find some comfort in this and to play those different roles. But that's not what DID is. Of course, it's different. Different states of consciousness, and there are
Okay.
dissociative barriers between the different states of consciousness. So you might not remember what you did if you were in an alternate state of consciousness, which are these different alters.
Right.
But I really dislike how it's presented on social media, and I think at least 99% of those people on TikTok that claim to have DID don't actually have it.
Totally agree. Totally agree with you because what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me because what I know about that, which what did we used to call that? A personality disorder, or what did we used to
Mm.
call it? Right? Like there was a famous
Multiple
movie.
personality disorder.
There you go. Thank you very much. Multiple. We used to call it that. And so, from what I even know from back in the day, was yeah, that's true. They would come out of the different states and not remember what the other person said. And it's always, always, again, I'm going to equate transsexualism to these disorders. We're very similar. This is a very rare thing, transsexual. It's never been huge. It's very rare, just like I think
Yes.
DID is very rare. And so it's interesting that you say it comes from trauma because some people are saying gender identity disorder also can come from some trauma space. So many of these things kind of, and that's why they're disorders and why they need to be under the label of disorder so that we can help you get back into. So when we see young people pretending they have autism or DID or PTSD or whatever else, BPD, whatever else is the new, these are all very common, it seems like now. This is very dangerous that we're
Yes.
letting people do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, autism and DID, they are more common than thought previously, but
Okay.
still, and I mean, with DID, it's important to understand it's not in reality, it's not as extreme or
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
how is it called? You don't really I forgot the word, but it's not really, you don't really see it that easily. It's much
Right.
more covert because it's a
Right.
trauma disorder and it's to protect yourself. It's not to be
That's right.
it's to protect. So it
I
should
understand what
be
that's
not,
right. So when
yeah.
trauma comes up, one of your alters comes up to so, you're right. So that's why I can tell you, even me not knowing much about what you're telling us, when I see the kids or young people doing that and they're switching back and forth on TikTok, I'm like, that's not that it's not how it works. It comes up from
No.
trauma, right? Yeah.
Yes. So, and especially because most alters, they wouldn't think of filming a TikTok when they are in the front state of of
That's
consciousness.
right.
They don't, they usually, most of the alters are very traumatized and they in different ways, and they don't think of doing a TikTok. I mean, some of them could potentially, but
But
I don't
yeah.
know any person who actually has it who wants to film themselves doing TikToks and stuff like that.
I totally agree with you, and that makes complete sense. Like, how do they know they're going to go into these spaces and they just have their cameras set up? It just seems so staged on
Yes.
so many levels. But that being said, it's still dangerous that we have this space where people can, especially young people, can go on and start self IDing as all of these disorders. And people who actually have it are watching this and thinking, wait a minute here, this is not fun. I'm not having
Yes.
fun. So,
Yes.
so so let's go back to the autism and the trans connection, right? So can you just give us a real blanket, sort of, if possible, definition of what autism is?
Yeah, so Yeah, it's a difference in the brain that causes divergence from the norm in several areas, and those
Okay.
areas are social differences, or yeah, social interaction, language development, and
Okay.
or use, sensory processing, need for routines and sameness,
Okay.
interests, emotional regulation and processing, and potentially motor skills, but not always.
Right. So motor skills might come like with level three, right? Like
No,
hardcore.
no, no,
No. Okay.
no. It can come with all
Oh, it can
sorts
come
of
with
levels.
all. Okay.
Hmm.
Great. So that's good to. So thank you for that. So yeah. So all of these things kind of play into autism, and in a way, autism is somebody who sort of sees things in a, would you say, more black and white kind of way as opposed to nuanced kind of way?
Um, yeah, that can be a trait that you think in more of a black or white way, but of course, if you don't have an intellectual disability, you can also work on that. I mean,
I see.
to
Right. You can
to
have
try
one.
to
Mhm.
see more nuance
So
in
you could have
things.
one of these, but not all of these. Like you could have a language situation or a social, but not necessarily have an
Yeah, you
emotional.
need to have at least in several of these areas, you need to have differences.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Okay. Great.
and
So now, uh, so with that, okay, go on if you want to elaborate
yeah,
a
I
little
just
more.
wanted to say that
Yeah.
it's also important to know that people think they categorize autistic people in more or less severe, but that's not really. You can't really do that as an
Okay.
outsider because I think it's really wrong to. Um, Categorize the severity based on an outsider's perspective instead of
Okay.
how much a
Right.
person suffers and struggles. And a
Right.
person might not be as obviously autistic as someone else, but really struggle and suffer on the inside. So that's also important to know. And
Thank you
you
for
can be
that.
a level three without being obviously autistic to outsiders.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, because you're right. How do I know what level, right? What level you are by just looking? Because you might be able to just walk the world and seem normal, but you're struggling on the inside to sort of function within societies.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, I uh, for example, I don't really have a lot of social interaction. I'm mostly at home on my own in my own safe space in my own world. So I have a lot of time to recharge and be in my own world. And I only leave the house for like 1 or 2 hours a day and maximum to pick up my medication and go grocery shopping, for example. And I always have my noise canceling headphones on. So I have maybe a few minutes of social interaction each day, on most days. I rarely ever have more than that. So for those few minutes or 1 hour of communication I can function normally, as it might seem, but I couldn't for every day for a long time, for example. Um, yeah,
fascinating.
that's
But you're able to sort of get yourself into a head space that you can go out for 2 hours or whatever, do your little shoppings and things you need to do, and come back. So yeah, so I see. Do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare yourself to go out into the world?
yeah. I usually need a long time to prepare, like
Okay.
usually at least 2 to 3 hours to prepare myself and be able to get up and my noise canceling headphones really help me a lot because they block out a lot. And I also it's much easier for me to be on my own when I leave the house and be with another person, because when I'm on my own I can be in my own world. I don't have to focus that much on the outside world except for traffic maybe. um but other than that I can be in my own world mostly, and that also really helps.
Right, right. So you're not having too much interaction with people, so you can just sort
Yeah.
of. So let so so what if somebody comes up to you in, let's say, a shop or something and asks you a question? Does that throw you off, or is it okay?
Yes,
Yeah,
it definitely does.
it throws you
Yeah.
off. Yeah, and then but that is that also why you wear your earphones so nobody will maybe interact with you, sort of like, because I do that in the gym because everyone wants to talk to me at the gym. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
so I always wear big earphones so nobody will come and talk to me because I want to work out. I don't want to talk to you. So on
Yes.
some, not, not to say it's the same thing, but I get it. So when you have your earphones, people just stay away from you, right?
Yes, that's
Right.
true. Yeah. Um,
So that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's very personal, but it really helps a lot of us understand people with
yes.
autism and why they act a certain way. Sometimes I might meet somebody who might be not wanting to give me any attention, and I think, wow, what a jerk. But then I realize, no, wait a minute, maybe they have problem with, interact. Because on our side, people who don't have autism might see that as something else. We might see it as you being snobby or not wanting to talk to us,
Yes.
or you know what I mean. But that's not necessarily true because it could be somebody like you who just can't have that situation,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And also, many autistic people, many autistic people have not as a more flat affect and less facial expressions, maybe. There's also the other extreme that you can have exaggerated facial
Okay,
expressions and
right.
body language. But the more commonly known trait is that autistic people have more of a flat affect and flat and reduced body language. So that might
Okay,
seem like maybe people might see them as unfriendly or something like that, but
yeah,
they're actually
yeah.
not. They just don't have as many expressions.
That's right. So thank you for that. So everyone can understand just because someone's not paying attention to you or giving you maybe a different look, there might be some other stuff happening there. So it helps us to give
Yes,
compassion and not to react, because what that is you're reacting about yourself. Why don't they like me? Why, instead of saying, but wait a minute, that person could actually be autistic or not be able to have social,
hmm,
because most people, a lot of people have social anxiety. You don't have to be autistic to have social
yeah,
anxiety.
that's
that
true.
that's
Yes,
that's prevalent, I think, in a lot of people. I tend to be very friendly and I say hi to everybody on my dog walks, and sometimes people don't want to, and I really can understand, maybe they just can't have that conversation with me.
yes,
I react to it sometimes that they're being snobby to me, but that's not necessarily the case. Now let me ask you
no.
this, Laura. Why do you think more? I noticed that more people are being well, I guess the question more is this: do you think more people are self-diagnosing with autism, or do you think diagnosis of autism is on the rise? Does that
Um,
make sense?
y-
Do,
yeah, I think
Well, I guess my
so.
question is, I see so many more people with autism, but I'm wondering, is that because more people are self-diagnosing as autism, or do you think autism is very, very much on the rise as a real thing?
Ah, oh, yeah, I understand. Mm, I don't think so. I think um, it's not more than it was before. But
Okay.
on one hand, more people are being recognized as autistic because we now have more knowledge on it, and we understand how it can present in different ways, and that it
Okay.
also usually presents differently in females. That females mask more, and that masking is a thing even. But of course, then there's also the self-diagnosis that's
Right.
also on the rise. So there, of course, there's also people who claim to be autistic or they think they are autistic, but they
Yeah.
probably aren't. But it's also very difficult to make the cutoff to know because it's not really it, it's it's a pattern of differences in several areas, but you can't really make the cut of exactly what is autistic, when is it enough difference to be autistic, or when is it not.
Mm,
And I usually tend to think that one factor needs to be that you are struggling or need support to not struggle, but I'm not sure if that's a fair factor to ask for. I'm not sure, but that's what I
But
think
it is.
sometimes.
It is
Yeah.
because I'll tell you why I think it is, and because one of them really does need help on something. You might not need a lot of help, but you might just need a little bit of help. Where some people
Mm.
who are saying they're autistic have none of that. So those are two different things. 100%.
Yes.
They can't be under the same. It's why I struggle and why I don't agree with transgender umbrella term. And then all of these
Mm.
things are underneath transgender, but that can't be because a non-binary person is not the same as me. We can't be under the same. So they're two
Mm.
different things. So I agree with you. I think maybe one could be something like, just to throw it out there, like, pre-autistic and then autistic. So they need to be separated because somebody who thinks they're autistic but isn't struggling like you, or having the struggle to go outside, shouldn't be in the same space as you, right?
Yes. Yeah, I also think like um yeah, for people like me, and I also think for maybe parents of autistic children, it can be frustrating when you see some autistic or content about autism on social media because
Yeah.
you think it doesn't represent how much I struggled. And I'm always like a little torn because, of course, you can't put everything in one single reel or one
That's
single video.
that's
So
right.
that's also important to understand. But on the other hand, I sometimes would like at least some little disclaimer on every reel or video that it's that autism is more than just what is in this certain video, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it involves a lot of struggling every day. I would like to have some kind of disclaimer at least.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. I think it will give people much more also understanding. When you just stamp autism, it's like, again, I'm equating the two with trans. When you just stamp trans, that's not a definition of it because there's so many different people taking on the label now. And I
Yes.
do think that can be dangerous for actual real autistic people who, if you from what I get from you and most people who have really been diagnosed have some struggle there, and you might need to have a little help. It doesn't matter if you're level 1 or level 3. There's still these things that you might
Yes.
necessarily need. And then when someone just says I'm autistic, it takes away from the sort of real actual importance of understanding the struggle that people go
Yeah.
through.
And it also makes people take autism less seriously.
That's
And they
right.
might think it's, yeah, everyone has it and it's not really a serious thing. Or,
That's
I mean, it's not a negative thing, but
no,
it
no.
causes a lot of struggle in this world because the world is made for neurotypical people.
That's right.
So,
That's what I'm saying. That's why it is dangerous that people can just go around saying they have autism. And also, why are they doing that, right? I always say the same question. Who wants to be trans? That is ridiculous. I don't
yeah.
I do not want to be trans, let me tell you. I wish I was born a
Yes.
man. I actually do, but I wasn't. So I fix it, right? And same with you. Maybe you wish you weren't this way, but you are and you have to figure out how to walk the world. But for people
Yes.
to take on these diagnoses as if they're just so simple, and so this is it's well, for myself, I find it to be extremely disrespectful to my
Yeah.
disorder and the struggle that I have gone through to get to this space. So are you seeing,
Yes.
do you feel on some level, Laura, do you feel the same way about autism?
Yeah, I definitely do. And uh, my autism is actually a really big reason uh, for me getting abused in the past and getting abused inside and outside of the family. My autistic traits were very often the factor that caused abuse. Um, and neglect too. And also outside of the family, I was very severely bullied for many, many years.
I'm sorry.
Um, Also with physical bullying, and I
Wow.
also have been physically harassed and attacked in public several times. Also, sometimes for autistic traits like stimming or
Yeah.
like being in my own world and maybe not being doing what a person wants me to do or
Yeah.
be like they want me to be.
Yeah.
And
I'm
of
so
course,
sorry.
that's not a fun thing. So
No, it's not. I was bullied, but it's not fun. It's horrible, and I'm so sorry. Can you? Yeah, it's just hard, my friend. So you have a lot of abuse trauma that you're dealing with from your childhood. And did anyone understand that you had autism when you were growing up, or was it not talked about?
no, it wasn't. And also, my parents also didn't want me to go to therapy. Like when my school requested it, I had to go for a short time, but then my father took me out of it again because they didn't want me in therapy, and they also they didn't understand me or didn't. I mean, they also didn't know anything about autism.
Hmm.
I mean, I have reports from daycare and from first grade, and
Hmm.
I gave them to the evaluator that evaluated me for autism, and they were really helpful because they mentioned many things that are autistic traits. Like they always described me as being in my own world and being
Right.
very uh, struggling with change a lot and having big social deficits, emotional deficits, struggling with motor skills, struggling with any kind of change, that I was a loner and
Hmm.
yeah, struggled with social interaction and stuff like that.
Right. Right, right. So instead of trying to understand what was going on, so your dad did not want you to go to therapy. Do you think your dad just wanted to think of you as a normal kid? So if you went into therapy, or you were considered not normal on some level?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
he wanted me to be a normal, happy girl,
yeah. Do
and
you have
being
brothers and
like
sisters?
him. I do. I have three half siblings, a step sibling, and a younger sibling. Yeah.
And how do you get along with your siblings?
Um, Fine, I think. Yeah, fine. I
Fine.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we didn't, with my older siblings, I didn't have that much contact growing up.
Right.
Um, but I did with my younger brother.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right. And
he's a
see,
great person.
it's so interesting because if you would have got diagnosed early on, I'm telling you, many of the things, in my opinion, that happened to you, like the bully behavior, they would have understood what was wrong, what was going on with you. And instead,
Yes.
that's why again, I'm going to keep telling people this is why diagnoses from actual real doctors and actual psychiatrists and therapists are so important, not only for us as people who struggle with things, but also for parents and the world. And you can start to understand why Laura was struggling as a young person. Instead, they were just stamping you with what? Did they call you stupid and stuff like that?
Yeah, weird, very weird.
Weird.
Yeah, weird, mostly weird, and being a loser and stuff like that.
Wow. Wow. I'm so sorry. I mean, I got that stuff too. I was struggling with my gender and my sexuality. So I was the same. I was kind of the same, very shy and withdrawn. And I played sports because it kept me in this space. I was called a loner, because I didn't socialize well at all because I was not comfortable in my
Yeah,
space. So
yes,
I
and
get that.
yeah, and I also really I tried so hard for a very long time to fit in and be like other girls and mask my autistic traits. And I really tried. I studied them. I observed them. Tried to copy their behavior, but it wasn't natural to me. So it seemed very weird and not natural. So others could tell, of course.
Right,
Yes.
which is also a whole other thing, right? You're trying to act like somebody
Mhm.
you're really not, and people can see that, and then that makes you a
Yeah.
weirdo again, right? But all
Yes,
you're trying to
exactly.
do, I mean, it's so wow. Thank you so much, Laura, for being so honest here today and giving us, these are very personal, vulnerable stories you're telling. So it means a lot to me that you trust me to bring this to people to see, because I think people will start to get a real more broad idea of what you struggle with and how we
Mhm.
have to have some more empathy for people who always considered weird, right? The
Yes.
weirdos. Well, it's not weird. It's just that we're not being able to sort of go. Now, that being said, here we have all these kids who could be autistic, right? 100%, but are saying they're
Mhm.
trans. That's
Yeah.
I have a huge concern for that, because I think many of these kids are not trans. I think they're
Yes.
autistic and dealing with stuff, right?
Autistic or traumatized, that
Or
too.
traumatized with some, because a lot of, so I interview a lot of kids who are detransitioners, and many of them didn't get diagnoses till after they detransitioned, and then the therapist worked on them with their trauma, and many of them, Laura, have been diagnosed with it's called BPD.
BPD. BPD.
BPD. Many.
Borderline personality disorder.
That's
Yes.
right. See?
And
And it's the,
that's
yeah, go on.
that's also partly caused by your childhood. BPD personality disorders. That almost like I think every person with BPD has some kind of trauma. Sometimes they don't see this trauma because it's emotional trauma,
Okay.
but
Okay.
every one of them also has had stuff in childhood that went very wrong.
Trauma.
And I mean,
Trauma. Trauma.
it's yeah, it's mostly girls that want to transition. That's also
That's right.
yeah,
That's
crazy.
right, Laura. That's the part where I'm like, hey, wait a minute here. Because I'll tell you what, if it was more level and I saw more boys wanting to be girls, and as I saw, here's the girls, okay? Here's the boys and
Mm,
here's the girls. Here's the girls all saying they're trans, right? And here's the boys. I'm like, okay, that is not, there's no way, because if it was actually a real thing, it would be more level or a little bit
yes,
like this, right? But it's literally like this.
I think so too.
So
Yes,
what you
and I
said earlier too, a lot of girls have more trauma-based stuff, right? You were saying, did you say more autism in girls is different than autism in boys? You said that, right?
it presents differently because
How does it
usually,
present?
not always, of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
great, sure, of
because
course.
autistic females very often they try to mask really hard. They try to copy others and fit in. If they don't have an intellectual disability, of course, and they really try to mask. So their autism might be more hidden and less visible on the outside. Um, and they also sometimes autistic girls can be more interested in social interaction. Of course, they struggle the same amount, but they have an interest. They want to have friends, whereas boys tend to not really want it as much. But of course, it's not true for everyone.
Sure.
There's also many autistic boys who would like to have friends, and autistic girls who don't have much interest in social interaction. But sometimes there's a tendency.
That makes total sense to me, and it makes sense why all these autistic girls are wanting to be boys. I mean, a lot of it makes
Yes,
sense to me if you look at it. So, could you explain to us what masking is?
yes. Masking is trying to hide your autistic traits and trying to present
Oh,
more neurotypical and seem
oh,
neurotypical to others.
I see. So would that be somebody who actually knows they're autistic, or someone who might not even know they're autistic but knows
Yes,
they're not being able to function a certain way?
yes, exactly. They might not know they're autistic, but they know they're different
Yeah,
and wrong, or they think they're wrong
yeah.
and have to be like the other people, so they try to hide their differences. And I did
So,
that very heavily for a long time.
okay.
And it's
Yeah.
very, very exhausting. It takes so much energy, emotional, mental, physical energy. And it also very often causes burnout. It causes mental illness.
Hmm.
It's very unhealthy to do it as much.
Of course it is, because you're not being you, right? And
Yeah.
you're not. This is why we need to know about autism. We need to know about these certain traits so that we don't shame you when you're being a loner, right, or a weirdo. It's not that at all. You're just not functioning the same way this other person. And
Yes.
when we start to understand that more, and we start to give these young people this idea that it's not bad to be autistic and it's okay to be this certain way, then maybe they're not going to want to take on this trans, because what they're doing is taking on a trans identity. They're not transitioning, they're taking on an identity,
Yes.
right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
with autism, it's also really important to understand that it's also typical for autism to have a kind of spiky profile, which means you might have uh, strengths in some areas, but very strong weaknesses in others, or your ability to do certain things varies a lot. Like maybe, for example, you might be able to talk well sometimes, really well, and then but be not able to talk at all in other situations, or
Okay.
you are very intelligent in school stuff, and but you really struggle with daily living things. Um, it's kind of typical to have a very spiky profile.
Okay, that makes sense too. So you could be strong in one thing and weak in another, and
Yes,
like you were saying
and
earlier. Yeah.
and I
And
also, for example, I also I'm sometimes not able to talk. I have those periods of where I'm not able to talk at all, or not very well. And I also, since I know myself now much better, I know what is important for me. For example, for this interview, it was I really knew it was so important for me to practice a lot. I practiced speaking out loud everything I want to say, and what you could maybe ask. I made sure to have a lot of recharge time before this interview that I didn't have much the days before. So I have energy to do this.
wow. Thank you. It means a lot to me that you would take the time and energy to sit here, even though you struggle with it. So that's another amazing thing, Laura. Thank you so much, because
Thank
it
you.
means you care. It does. It really means you care enough to set your own needs aside to really voice this concern that you have as an autistic person with things happening. And that's what I want, and that's why my interviews do so well, because people see you, and I have a very compassionate audience of people who watch this show, and they're very concerned about this whole thing. So we need your voice, and it really just means a lot that you would create the space to sit here, even understanding how difficult it is for you to be
Yeah,
here. It just says a lot about you, Laura. It says you have a lot of integrity and you're a really good person. You are.
thank you. You too.
Thank you. So what are some of the other kind of things that you think you need to talk about? I really want to get into the DID, but I think we're going to have to bring you back to talk about that, because that's a whole other subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wanted to talk to somebody. Do you also have
Yes.
you been diagnosed with DID?
Yes, I have. Yes,
Oh,
I've been
wow.
diagnosed in 2019.
Wow. And that's also trauma related as well, right?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Wow. See, I want to
Yeah, I
have a
would.
whole conversation with you about that, because
Me
it concerns
too.
me that young people are acting. And when I say young people, I mean, I'm 61. So I mean like 20-year-old kids on TikTok and 15-year-old. I have DID acting like it's fun,
Yes.
right? But
Yes. That hurts me so much to see that.
I know.
It
I can't even
concerns me so
imagine.
much.
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah,
that, because that's why.
especially because it's a very severe trauma disorder. It's really nothing
That's
fun, not a
right.
fun role play.
No, how could that be fun? That cannot be fun. There's no way. Any of this, what we're talking about, is not fun. Okay, everything we're talking
Yes.
about here should never be put in a position or in a conversation that says trans joy. I feel euphoric because I'm trans. That's it, like saying I feel
Mm,
euphoric because I'm autistic. It's what?
yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I also think it's very difficult. This thing, especially, I'm very torn on this because, on one hand, it's like, of course, you should love yourself. You should be able to accept your autism and see your strangers, and maybe even think, even though I struggle so much and suffered so much,
Sure.
I don't want to change myself. It's okay that I'm autistic. That's one thing, but there's so many people that don't know what autism is, and when they see that content of autistic joy and stuff like that, they might think, okay, it's not a serious thing, and they don't struggle, or it's really, I don't know. That's always the thing I'm torn about, and I don't really know how to solve this. If
Well,
you, mm,
no, you make a lot of sense
okay,
because here's that you're right because you have to accept, right? I had to accept my gender dysphoria. You have to accept your
mm,
diagnosis, but that's not the same thing as saying, "Woohoo, joy, joy." It's saying I accept it. I'm not mad at it. It's part of who I am, and I'm doing it
yes,
to figure out, but you're not running around with flags and there's a difference between
yeah,
accepting it and realizing I love myself. I've been diagnosed with autism. I have to just deal with it and move, which is what you do. You've actually learned how to deal with it, which is amazing and beautiful to see. But that's not the same thing as running around with the autistic flag, right? And saying, "Yay!"
yeah,
That's totally different. And I think
yeah,
that those things are being mixed up. They're being mixed up on some level to say like that's why I
yeah.
think all these kids want to self ID as these spaces.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I really wish that people knew more about autism in general because, on one hand, of course, when they interact with an autistic person, to understand them better and not judge them, or to know how to read them or interact with them. And also that autistic people can get diagnosed early because, especially females, they get diagnosed much too later, not at all. Because masking is an overlooked thing, or the different presentations, and it's really important to get diagnosed early. It's really, it can prevent you from prevent so much harm.
That's right.
It
No, makes sense.
it
Like
can
you as a
get you the
kid,
right
I go
support.
back to thinking of you as a kid. If they knew you were autistic, they would have treated you completely different. So
Mm,
so let's say there's a parent watching right now and they might have an idea or something. How would a parent know, I guess is what I'm know how to get their child or why would a parent get their child sort of assessed for autism?
mm.
I mean, is there
I
things they
think,
should look for?
I mean, yeah, I mentioned the different areas. Of course, I didn't go into
Right,
them as much. There are
right.
actually really good accounts on social media too, on Instagram, from actual specialists in autism.
Oh, great,
They explain it
great.
really well. They make many posts and actually explaining how in the different areas, differences in those areas can present in different ways. Um,
Great.
there's Mrs. Speech IEP. She's really great, and also
Okay.
the Expert Ally, or Expertly. I don't know how to pronounce it. Those two
Okay.
are really great. And if you
Okay,
see
great.
the differences in your child, you should get them evaluated, even if it doesn't label them in a bad way or something. It's really important so they
Yeah,
can get the
yeah,
support and not be judged and be understood correctly.
that's great. 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 So I'll get those names from you and I'll have you email me if you wouldn't mind
Hmm.
so I can add those to the
Yes.
description here so people can actually go and follow those doctors and I think this is how we kind of we sort of bring it back into a more sort of important space that says yes, autism exists, but you need to understand diagnoses and we need to understand what it really means. And it's not some kid on
Hmm.
TikTok saying that they have autism. I mean, somebody who sitting right next to me here, of course, in Switzerland, and I'm here, but really does have it and is really concerned. You're
Yeah.
concerned with these people just because it doesn't help autistic people when people pretend or this. It's not
No.
helping. No, no, not at
Yeah.
all, friend. Um, so let's end now because we're almost at an hour, but I want to ask you this, and I would love to bring you back to talk about DID because I think that could be a
Mhm.
hugely important conversation. And I've never spoken to anybody with that. So I would appreciate it if you would be willing to do another interview with
Yes,
me on that. It would be
I
great.
would.
Um, do you think you do you think you would want to say something right now before we close to maybe the world or maybe just some wisdom of yours?
Um, Maybe listen, that's a more general thing, not an autism thing. Listen to
Sure.
people who have different viewpoints and perspectives, even if it's not that of your own. Just really actually consider it and think about it and question yourself and be kind to everybody in general and really really try to understand other viewpoints too. I try to do that myself very often.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's what we've lost in the world, right? Having different opinions is completely okay. It doesn't mean we hate each
Yes.
other. But it's been put into a space that keeps us divided. And I think, well, who's
Yeah.
ever in charge of all this nonsense, the higher people up there, they're doing this to us, and they want to keep me and you separate. They don't want us to come together to have these
Yeah.
conversations, and that's why it's so important and so beautiful that you stepped up, Laura, and that I think that your struggles mean something to me, and I do appreciate you being so open and honest because now I understand it even more and can have even more compassion for these young people who are struggling and for you. I can
Yeah.
have the compassion. And now I can understand when I speak to the guy at the grocery store and he doesn't give me any attitude, maybe he's dealing with something. And I'm
Yeah.
cool with that now. So
Mhm.
thanks, Laura. You're a beautiful human, and I appreciate you so much. And leave Laura lots of beautiful comments or questions too, and we'll get them to her. And I'll put those IG things for those professionals so we can all start to learn more and understand and have more compassion, and hopefully move forward and get back to a civilized, a civilized
Yes.
space. So I'll see you guys all
And
on
have
Wednesday on the live.
compassion.
Compassion, friend. It's the best thing ever to have compassion.